Welcome back to Real Fear Files. Tonight, we're diving deep into the shadowed heart of the Appalachian wilderness, where countless hikers and hunters have claimed to meet something not quite human. I've gathered 9 chilling Bigfoot encounter stories that will make you rethink every rustle in the woods. Before we jump into the terror, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. And hey, you can always change your mind later. Got an idea for a future video? Drop your suggestions in the comments. I'm always watching and listening. Story 1. We got cut loose early that day. Snow had already started hammering down before 4, thick and fast, like someone upstairs dumped a sack of feathers over the mountains. The boss didn't even pretend to fight it. He just waved us out and said if we waited any longer, some of us weren't making it home. Fine by me. I grabbed a gas station coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard, tossed it in the cup holder, and headed toward the ridge road behind Weaver's Gap. Folks around here know that stretch through McAllen Ridge real well. Sharp curves that sneak up on you. Tall, old trees pressed right against the asphalt. Steep shoulders that'll send you sliding if you breathe wrong. Pretty in spring. Pure hell in winter. My truck hated the cold. Heater only sorta worked. You had to keep the fan on low or it'd blow nothing but ice breath. Defrost kept up, just barely. I clicked the wipers to medium and crawled along slow enough to annoy anybody behind me. Not that anybody else was crazy enough to be out there. The sky was dim and gray, that weird winter color where daylight and storm clouds blur together. No shadows, no depth, just a flat sheet of cold. Then I saw 'em. Brake lights. A fast flick of red off to my left, there for a second, and then gone. At first I figured someone pulled off to stretch their legs or turn around. But then it hit me. That wasn't a turnout. That was the old access road to a shut-down logging trail. The thing hadn't been plowed in years. Hell, I thought it was blocked off. Nobody should have been down there. No cabins, no camps, no nothing. Just a rough path into the deep woods. We hunted around those parts when I was younger, and even back then you avoided that place after the first snow, unless you hated your truck or hated your life. I rolled past the fork slow, thinking about stopping. Decided not to. Went maybe a minute before something in my gut twisted like, nope, turn around. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was how fast those brake lights had vanished. Whatever it was, it bothered me. So I eased to the shoulder, backed up careful, and swung onto the logging trail. Fresh snow blanketed everything. The tire tracks stood out crisp and clean, 2 long lines cutting straight ahead. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through trees, crowded tight like they were leaning in to listen. I told myself I was just checking things out, doing the responsible thing, making sure nobody spun out down there. I volunteered on backwoods searches before. You see how fast things go sideways out here. People panic, make dumb decisions, end up freezing where nobody thinks to look. The road wound through the woods, tighter and tighter, then dipped into a low patch where thick brush slapped at the doors. I kept expecting to spot a car, nose first, in a ditch, maybe some hazard lights struggling through the snowfall. But nothing. Just trees, snow, and those tracks guiding me deeper. When the forest thinned, the ground dropped hard on the left side. My headlights hit the edge of a steep drop, and the tire tracks ended right there. Dead stop. I slammed the brakes, killed the engine, and leaned forward. Down about 30 yards in the ravine sat a small car, nose buried in a shallow ditch like it had taken a flying leap off the edge. One taillight blinked slow, barely alive under the falling snow. Trunk was popped open, hanging crooked. Didn't even hesitate, grabbed my flashlight, left my truck door wide open, and slid down the slope, half falling through brush and snow. No footprints. That slapped me in the face right away. Nothing around the car except the busted bushes where it landed. No tracks showing someone climbed out, no drag marks, no sign of struggle. Just the silent wreck. I circled the car, calling out once, then again. My voice didn't echo, just sort of died in the heavy air. No blood, no bags, no jacket tossed aside. No phone. Nothing human. I tugged at the doors, locked tight. Windows rolled up. Front windshield cracked, heavy but not shattered. Didn't look like the driver busted out. Didn't look like anyone tried anything. So where the hell did they go? I climbed back up the slope, slipping and cussing the whole way, until I caught a little cell signal. Sent my cousin Jackson a text. He's on the county search team. Told him I found a wreck off the old trail and figured he could run the plate. Maybe get a tow out before the storm swallowed the thing. I waited, breath showing in clouds. That's when I heard it. A single heavy thud. Sharp. Final. Like something big dropping straight down onto metal. I whipped around and shined the light down the ravine. Something massive crouched on top of the wrecked car. Not standing, crouching, like it had leapt down from the trees and landed on the roof. The metal sagged under it. Its hands pressed against the roof. Big, wide hands, human-shaped but wrong. Too long, too heavy. Covered in dark, matted hair like it had been living inside a dirty creek for years. I froze. Didn't even think about running. Didn't breathe. It didn't growl. Didn't act surprised. It just slowly turned its head, like it only just realized I was there. I lifted the flashlight, hand shaking. Its head moved strange, like the neck didn't work right, like it was dragging a weight. When the beam hit its face, I saw enough to ruin sleep forever. Flat nose, long, wide mouth, pale skin with a dead bluish tint, eyes small and far apart, staring like it didn't blink anymore. It just watched me, waiting, thinking. Then it stood. Calm, slow, deliberate. It stepped off the roof and walked into the tree line on the far slope without a sound. Didn't even look back. I didn't follow. Would have rather eaten broken glass. Then my phone buzzed. It was Jackson texting back. He asked for coordinates, wanted to know if I saw any blood. I sent him the pin and snapped a quick picture of the wreck from where I stood, figuring it'd help him know what he was rolling into. I didn't even think about the thing that had just walked off. My hands were still shaking, and taking a picture felt like something normal to do, something human. Didn't look close at the photo. Not yet. I slid into my truck, slammed the door, and sat there breathing hard, waiting for my chest to stop pounding. The snowfall thickened fast, erasing everything. Trees turning to white ghosts, road fading into a smear. I opened the photo. At first all I saw was the car, listing sideways in the ditch, trunk hanging open like a busted jaw. Then my eyes drifted to the background. There, near the tree line on the far side, the same direction that thing had walked, was a face. Just a sliver, maybe half of it, but it was unmistakable. The same pale gray-blue skin, the same wide mouth, the same too far apart eyes, only higher, way higher, like 8 feet up. Like whatever it was had leaned out from behind a skinny tree that had no business hiding anything bigger than a raccoon. It didn't make sense. Its shoulders would have stuck out, its weight would have bent the trunk. But there it was, tucked behind the wood like physics didn't apply to it. Just watching. My whole body went cold. Not from the truck heater dying, cold, deeper than that. I sent the picture to Jackson. Didn't say a word. My phone rang instantly. "You saw it, didn't you?" he said. His voice was low, almost like he was whispering inside his house. I didn't answer. Didn't trust myself not to sound crazy. Then he said it. "I've seen one too. Same area, same weather. 3 years ago." My grip tightened on the phone. He told me he never told anyone. Said he'd taken a picture just like I did. Said it looked damn near identical. But he deleted his after a week. Couldn't stand knowing the thing might be in the background watching him, even after the moment had passed. He told me to stay in the truck with the doors locked until the tow crew got there. Didn't matter that the thing hadn't chased me. Didn't matter that it walked off calm. He said that didn't mean it was gone. I didn't argue. An hour crawled by. Storm kept getting uglier, snow slamming sideways across the ridgeline. Trees creaked in the wind. A few times I thought I heard something move out there, something big pushing through brush, but it could have been the storm. Could have been. Tow crew finally arrived. Big truck with chains wrapped around the tires, lights cutting through the whiteout. Jackson showed up behind them in his county rig. By the time we climbed back down the slope, the tracks were almost erased. Just shadows in the snow where something huge had walked. But even those disappeared while we stood there. Jackson looked at me, pale as the snow. "This is why I didn't tell nobody," he said. "They vanished too fast. No tracks, no prints, no proof. You sound like you're insane." The tow guys didn't see anything weird. Just a car that somehow managed to fall off a road nobody uses. They asked a couple questions, shrugged, hooked it up, and started hauling it winch by winch up the slope. If they noticed the crushed roof, they didn't comment. Jackson and I stood off to the side, saying nothing. Every time the wind stopped for half a second, I listened hard, waiting for another thud, another branch snap, something. Nothing came. The storm swallowed every sound. When the car reached the top, the tow guys loaded it up and left fast, wanting to beat the storm. Jackson lingered a moment. He kept looking at the woods like he expected something to step out. He told me he still thinks about the one he saw. Said it stood in a ravine just watching him, same as mine. Same dead-colored skin, same wrong-shaped head. Said when he raised his flashlight, it didn't flinch. Just turned its shoulders like an old man stretching, then walked away into the timber. Just like mine. We didn't talk long. He told me to head straight home and call him when I got there. I didn't argue. I started my truck, turned around slow, and crept back down the logging trail until I hit the main road. The storm smothered everything, but I stayed focused on the next curve, next hill, next patch of blurry pavement. Anything to keep from looking into the woods. Every few minutes I'd catch something out of the corner of my eye. Shapes between the trees, tall shadows shifting behind the snowfall. But I refused to turn my head. Not once. Not even when one shape seemed to pace me for a second. I stared straight ahead and kept the truck moving. When I finally reached the highway, I didn't breathe until the lights of a distant town came into view. I pulled over at an empty rest stop, shut the engine off, and called Jackson. He answered before the first ring finished. "You home?" he asked. "Almost," I said. "You?" He said he was on his way back and wouldn't be taking that side of the ridge ever again. And I agreed. That road is done for me. Don't matter if it's summer, winter, or the end of the world, I'm not driving that trail again. We never shared the photos. Not with the sheriff, not with friends, not even with each other. Didn't feel right. Didn't feel safe. Like showing them around would invite something in. Now, when I'm driving at night, and I see brake lights where they shouldn't be, deep in the woods, down some forgotten trail, I keep driving. No good comes from checking anymore. And if I ever catch sight of something shaped almost human out in the trees, something tall and still and too damn pale, I don't look twice. And I sure as hell don't stop. That night, as soon as I felt sure whatever I saw had gone back into whatever nightmare it crawled from, I turned my truck toward the highway and didn't slow down until my hands stopped shaking. I haven't taken that ridge in winter since, and I won't. Not after what climbed on that car. Not after what watched me from the trees. Not after what followed us into the storm. Story 2. I went to stay with my cousin Blake for winter break that year. His cabin sat way out near Mercer Glen, buried deep enough in the woods that you could walk past it 5 times and still miss the damn thing. Blake lived there alone, in the little place his dad built back when the old mill was buzzing. Now it was just a shack tucked between bare trees and snowbanks stacked higher than the porch rail. The kind of snow that didn't melt till April. I drove up from Monroe after my final exam. Took nearly 4 hours thanks to the storm hammering the roads, but it felt worth it. Blake was the only family I still kept in touch with. We hadn't seen each other in years, no drama, just life pushing us in opposite directions. He was my age, but he'd been on his own since he was 16. He worked odd jobs, fixed sleds, sharpened tools, whatever paid enough to buy canned food and nails. He was always better with his hands than I'd ever be. That winter he had nothing steady going on, but he didn't act like it bothered him. I think he liked the quiet, liked being left alone. I figured the next couple of weeks would be the same, quiet and uneventful. I brought books, notebooks, sweaters thick enough to survive a blizzard. Blake warned me I'd lose phone service after passing the old Texaco, and I thought he was full of it. He wasn't. The first couple of days were easy, cold as hell, but peaceful. We spent the evenings eating awful chili from dented cans and swapping stupid stories from high school. The kind of stuff you talk about when you realize you actually miss the person sitting across from you. He still had that messy grin, the one that made you feel like he knew something you didn't. There was no TV, just a battered radio and the wood stove that filled the whole place with the smell of pine and smoke. Then on the third morning, the power died. Not gradual, dead. A flick from the overhead light, then total silence. No hum from the fridge, no heater blowing. Blake didn't panic. We lit the stove, dug up some candles that smelled like lemon mixed with burnt rubber. He said the power cut sometimes when ice got bad, but when I asked how long it took to come back, he hesitated. Usually a day, he said, then shrugged. We'll see. But the day passed with no trucks, no plows, not even the usual chainsaws from the hill. The radio hissed static no matter how much we spun the knob. Blake kept telling me it was probably the weather, but the way he kept glancing toward the windows said something else. That night, I stepped out back to dump scraps and noticed the snow near the fence was messed up. Not footsteps, not even close. It looked like something had dragged itself through the yard. Long grooves carved deep into the snow like elbows and knees sliding along. No starting point, no ending point. The trail just crawled toward the woods and vanished under the dark trees. I stared way too long. When I told Blake, he didn't say much, just nodded slow, like it lined up with something he didn't want to say out loud. Things went bad on the third night. Around 2 a.m, I woke to a sound that punched right into the silence. 3 knocks. Sharp, heavy, evenly spaced. Not the cabin creaking, not the wood stove shifting. Something hitting wood on purpose. I sat up, heard it again. Blake was already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch, pulling on his boots like he'd been waiting for it. He didn't look scared. He looked resigned. "You heard it too?" he whispered. I nodded. Another knock echoed, lower this time, like something tapped the porch railing. I slid the curtain just enough to peek through. Snow everywhere. But that strange drag trail was back, and this time it looked new, fresh grooves cutting across the yard. I told Blake maybe it was a raccoon or a tree limb fallen off, trying to convince myself. He didn't answer, just kept staring at his rifle propped up against the wall. In the morning, he checked the shed while I stayed inside with my coat still zipped. When he came back, he looked sick. "There's prints," he said. "Handprints. But they ain't right." He showed me pictures on his phone. The prints were huge, bigger than either of ours. 5 fingers, yeah, but spaced wrong. No palm. Just long, narrow digits pressed straight into the wood like something was guessing how hands worked. At the end of each one, a deep pit where a claw might have pushed down. Not sharp, just heavy. Wrong. We barely slept that night. We pushed a dresser and an old trunk against the door. Took turns resting while the rifle sat on the coffee table between us. Every groan of the wind sounded like something walking the porch. By day 5, we decided we had to leave. Problem was, Blake's truck wouldn't even cough. No lights, no click. Dead as the power grid. My car sat outside buried to the damn windows. We still had food, but the cabin kept getting colder. You could see your breath even in the bedroom, except right next to the stove. That night I woke again, but not from knocking. I woke from breathing. Slow, heavy, wet, and close. Not outside, not behind the wall. It felt like whatever was breathing was inside the room, like it was circling us without taking a single step. I didn't move, didn't blink. My chest started to burn from holding in air. Across the room, Blake was awake too, eyes wide open, staring straight at the ceiling like he was waiting for something to touch him. In the morning, new tracks circled the cabin. 5 loops at least. Long, wide oval shapes, too spaced out for any human stride. No boot could leave that shape. No animal either. One window, mine, had a smear on the glass. Like something leaned in, pressed its face right up close, held there long enough for its breath to melt the frost. That day, Blake sat on the porch with the rifle across his knees, watching the woods like he was afraid to blink. He didn't say much, but later he muttered that weird things had happened out there before. "Not like this," he added. "Not aimed at me." I didn't like the way he said it. That night I woke up freezing. The fire was dead, the room pitch black, and Blake was gone. Blake was gone. I shot upright so fast I got dizzy. The cabin was freezing, dark except for a faint glow leaking in from the moon bouncing off the snow outside. For a second I thought maybe he just went to use the outhouse, but the way the cold hit my lungs told me the front door had been open recently. The air felt disturbed. I whispered his name once. Nothing answered. My boots were half frozen, but I shoved my feet in and grabbed the candle stub sitting on the table. The wick barely caught a flame. It shook in my hand as I moved toward the door. When I stepped out, the first thing I saw were the tracks. Not boot prints, not anything human. Big, wide. 3 deep impressions like something with 3 massive toes had walked around the porch, leaving dents that went inches into the snow. And beside them, the drag marks again, carved in long swipes like elbows pulling a giant body across the ground. I followed the prints down the steps, heart slamming against my ribs. The cold cut into my face with every breath. Blake's footprints were there too, fresh, hurried, running straight toward the shed. I called his name again, louder. The trees swallowed it. Not even an echo came back. When I reached the shed, the door was wide open, hanging crooked like someone ripped it sideways. The lock, which I'd watched him latch the night before, was snapped in half on the ground, like a stick. The candle was too dim to see inside, so I shoved the door further open and stepped in. Blake wasn't there, but something had been. The floor was covered with prints, those same long, clawed hand shapes, pressed deep into the dirt like something crawled across the entire shed. Tools were scattered everywhere. A shovel bent at the handle. A jar of nails spilled across the floor like they'd been slapped off the shelf. Then I saw the smear. A long streak across the wall, dark even in the low light. Not blood, at least it didn't smell like it. More like thick mud mixed with something oily. I touched it with one glove and instantly wished I hadn't. It was warm. Warm. When I stepped back outside, the wind shifted and carried something through the trees. A low groaning sound, like a man calling for help, only stretched out and broken in the middle. My stomach flipped. It almost sounded like Blake. Almost. I followed the sound toward the tree line. The candle died as soon as I reached the first row of pines, so I tossed the stub and kept going. The sky had that gray pre-dawn haze, just enough light to see the outlines of trees and the occasional glint of ice hanging from branches. The groaning came again, deeper this time. I forced myself to keep walking, even though every step made the snow squeal under my boots like something warning the woods I was coming. Then I saw something. A shape leaned against a tree. I rushed toward it, praying it was Blake. It wasn't. It was his coat. Just his coat, hung up neatly on a snapped branch like someone draped it there. Inside the coat was nothing, just empty sleeves. But the snow around it was packed down, like someone had stood there for a long time. And beside the impression were more of those prints. Big, wide, digging deep. I backed away slowly. Whatever had taken Blake wanted me to find this, wanted me to follow. A branch snapped behind me. I froze so hard my muscles locked. Another snap, closer. Then something slid across the snow. Not footsteps, dragging, pulling, like a body heaving itself along the ground. I turned my head just enough to look back. Between the trees, maybe 20 feet away, something moved. Not walking, crawling. Huge shoulders, long arms sinking into the snow up to the elbow. A face I couldn't see, just darkness where a head should be, taller than any person crouched like that. I didn't run, I bolted. Branches whipped my face, snow sprayed up behind me, and the sound followed. Heavy, dragging, faster than I could think something that size could move. I could feel it gaining, hear the snow tearing and crunching in deep scoops behind me. When the cabin finally came into view, I threw myself onto the porch, grabbed the door frame, and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I locked the deadbolt, then shoved the dresser and trunk back in front of it. The dragging stopped outside, but something leaned against the door. The wood sighed and bent inward, not cracking, but flexing. Then came the breathing again, deep, wet, slow, like whatever was on the other side was smelling through the cracks. I held the rifle the way Blake had showed me, aimed at the door, waited. Minutes passed, then an hour, then silence. When daylight finally bled through the windows, I waited another 30 minutes before moving the furniture. I opened the door only an inch and saw nothing. Just the snow-covered yard and a sky turning pale blue. I didn't bother with my car. I didn't check the shed again. I didn't go back for Blake's coat. I just walked. Through knee-deep snow, past the old Texaco, down the empty road until my phone finally caught a single weak bar. I called for help. They found me numb, half frozen, babbling that my cousin was gone. They searched the woods for 2 days. They found the shed torn up, the broken tools, the coat still hanging from that branch. But not Blake. Not even tracks by then. Fresh snow wiped everything clean. The sheriff told me it was probably a bear. A big one. Maybe rabid. But bears don't knock politely on doors. They don't crawl around cabins 5 times in perfect circles. They don't breathe warm air against bedroom windows in the middle of a blizzard. And they sure as hell don't mimic your cousin's voice in the woods when he's already gone. I never went back to that cabin. And I never will. Story 3. My sister asked if I could watch her boy, Liam, for the afternoon while she ran some errands. I said, sure thing. Honestly, it felt good to have a little task to focus on, a distraction from all the weird quiet in my head. Her house was calm, almost too calm, and Liam made babysitting easy. He was sweet, predictable, the kind of kid who made you forget to check your phone because he'd keep you busy with small, funny things. That afternoon, I tucked him into his nap, same as always. His crib was wooden, slatted sides, tucked down the hall from the living room. From where I plopped onto the couch, I could see straight into his room. That gave me peace of mind, especially since I was alone in the house. I pulled a throw over myself, closed my eyes for just a second, not meaning to fall asleep. I was wiped out, physically and emotionally. Grief still clung to me in that strange way, quiet, persistent, always there even while life kept moving. I drifted into that half-sleep state where you're aware but distant, like watching the world from behind a pane of frosted glass. Then I heard him moving, Liam giggling, bouncing slightly in his crib. Not crying, just the little sounds that made my chest unclench. I called out lazily, "Hey, buddy, nap time for Auntie, yeah?" His laugh rang back, bright and pure. And then I heard whistling. Sharp, clear. Not faint, not the wind. Just a few short notes, like someone strolling through the house casually, whistling without a care. Wrong. Totally wrong. I bolted upright. Heart flopped in my chest, stuttering between panic and freeze. I stared down the hall at Liam. He was standing, gripping the crib rail, facing the closet, still giggling. Pure joy, like peekaboo magic. But something in me froze. This wasn't a ghost. Not that feeling. Someone was in the house. That was my first thought. Someone broke in silently. I didn't pause, didn't check the closet. I sprinted down the hall, scooped him up, and bolted outside in my socks. We sat on the front steps, him bouncing gently in my lap, while I tried to call my friend Rachel. My voice was shaking. I tried not to sound insane. She picked up, and after listening to me ramble about whistling in the empty house, she promised to be there in 10 minutes. When she arrived, we walked through the house slowly, me holding Liam like armor. But everything was normal. Windows locked, doors secured. Nothing moved, nothing touched. I told her what I heard, and credit where it's due. She didn't laugh, just nodded slowly, like she'd seen things like that before. Later, when we tried to get Liam settled and changed, he suddenly turned his head toward the closet and said, "Papa." It stopped me cold. That's what he called my stepdad. He barely said the word, still learning to talk, yet this time, he said it like recognition. Not fear, not excitement, recognition. A strange calm settled in me. It didn't feel threatening. It felt like a check-in, like someone impossible had appeared just to say, "I'm here." That day, something shifted. I stopped ignoring the little moments, the weird, precise things that didn't make sense but felt deliberate. Years later, I was in my early 20s, newly married. My husband introduced me to a couple he worked with, Jared and May. They were obsessed with the paranormal, haunted sites, old folklore, ghost hunts. We clicked instantly, like finding people speaking the same quiet language I'd been mumbling to myself for years. One Friday night, they invited me to explore a cemetery near the old state hospital in Elbridge. Rumor had it the place was active, especially at night, though it wasn't dark in the usual creepy sense. Bright floodlights lit the lot like a security check, making it feel like the light was hiding something instead of showing it. We drove over, loaded down with flashlights, extra batteries, and more coffee than any sane person should drink. I remember laughing in the car, the tension from years of weird moments slowly easing. Felt like a night out, not an investigation. The first hour was uneventful, just walking among headstones, whispering, taking photos. A hum from streetlights overhead. Still. Quiet. Then, near a patch of overgrown grass laced with ivy, I felt a brush against my cheek. Reflexively, I wiped at it. Nothing. No low-hanging branch, no plant. Just air. Empty. I told May, and she said, "Same spot got me too." We moved down a slope toward a chain-link fence separating the cemetery from a government building. Flat, concrete, sterile. Lights harsh, stark, almost blinding. Then I saw him. A man. Walking along the fence, flashlight in hand, sweeping the ground in slow arcs. Security guard? Possibly. Unauthorized area? Maybe. I was already rehearsing apologies. But then he stopped. Just stopped mid-stride. Then, deliberate, precise, he turned in place, perfectly timed, almost like choreography. He raised his flashlight, sweeping toward us. The beam hit me square in the chest and face, blinding. But his figure? Invisible. Shadowed under the brim of his cap. It didn't feel like he was looking at us. Felt like he was performing the act of looking at us. Timing, motion, too perfect to be random. No words were spoken. We backed off slowly. Then we walked fast, side by side, keeping our eyes down. No one said anything until we reached the car. After that night, I stopped chasing ghosts. After that night at the cemetery, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just the usual shivers down my spine. It was precise, deliberate, like someone, or something, knew I was paying attention. Weeks passed, but the memory stayed sharp. I kept thinking about the man, the way his flashlight beam had pinned me without revealing a face. The precision of his movements haunted me more than anything else. It wasn't a person. It was an act, a ritual, a performance I wasn't meant to understand. Months later, Jared and May invited me back to another site. A different place this time, a sprawling estate near an abandoned mill. Stories said it had been used for government research decades ago. The locals whispered about strange lights, strange figures walking the grounds at night. We showed up right after dark, armed with flashlights, cameras, and way too much nervous energy. The sky was clear, the moon hidden behind fast-moving clouds. Everything smelled damp, like decaying wood mixed with cold metal. The gates were chained but weak. Rusted links made it easy to slip inside. At first it was boring. Just the three of us walking along cracked concrete paths, snapping photos of crumbling buildings. Even the air didn't make a sound. Too quiet. Then I felt it again. The brush against my arm. Quick, light, deliberate. I turned. Nothing. Trees, broken fences, shadows dancing across walls, but nothing solid. May saw it too. She whispered, "Stop moving so fast. It's following your attention." I froze. Her words made every hair on my arms stand up. My eyes darted, searching for the impossible. We moved deeper into the property, toward a low building with boarded-up windows. The concrete was chipped, stained, smell of mildew thick in the air. I noticed footprints in the dust, too deep for any of us. Narrow, spaced oddly, like fingers had pressed into the ground. Not shoes, not paws, something else. I crouched to look closer. There were marks I couldn't explain, long, deep scratches along the cement. They weren't chaotic. They were deliberate. Deliberate like someone, or something, was marking territory. We pressed on, keeping to the shadows, flashlights low. And then we heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps above us. Soft, padded, but heavy. Not fast, not running, just pacing. Overhead, across a roof or a mezzanine. I whispered to Jared and May. They froze. No one moved. No one breathed. Then came a sound that stopped my heart. A whistle. Short, simple, childish almost. But wrong. Too clear, too near. Not a stray bird, not the wind. Someone, or something, was there, testing us. We didn't dare look up. The whistle came again, closer. Our shadows danced across the cracked walls, but we couldn't see the source. I felt eyes on me, inside my mind, under my skin, tracing every movement. Then, suddenly, a figure appeared in the doorway. Uniform-like, yes, but impossible. It was tall, unnervingly still. Hands at its sides, motionless, as if it had stepped out of time. The flashlight in one hand didn't point anywhere. Its head tilted, just slightly, and I could feel its gaze, though the face was hidden in shadow. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It existed in the space between movement and stillness. Jared whispered, "Do you see it?" His voice trembled. I nodded, too terrified to speak. And then it happened. The figure turned, not casual, not fluid. Every motion calculated. The beam from its flashlight swept across the ground, right at us. I could feel it on my chest, my eyes blinded, yet I couldn't see anything but darkness under its hat. It felt like a message, not a threat, a warning, a performance. We weren't meant to interact, just to witness. We backed away slowly, every step measured, every breath held. The air felt thick, heavier where it passed. When we reached the car, the figure didn't move, didn't follow. It just existed. The drive home was silent. None of us spoke. The city lights in the distance didn't feel like safety. They felt like a barrier, separating us from something that didn't belong in this world. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every draft felt like the figure was there, just outside. My mind replayed its movements, the precision of its pauses, the way the beam of light felt like it was inspecting me, not illuminating me. After that, I stopped chasing ghosts. Not because I didn't believe. I believed more than ever. But because some things weren't meant to be understood. They were performances, rehearsed centuries ago, and we were only allowed to witness. Years later, I still remember Liam's voice. The way he said, "Papa," clear, precise, as though he recognized a presence I couldn't see. I remember the brush on my cheek in the cemetery, May saying, "It's following your attention," and the tall, uniformed figure at the abandoned mill, its flashlight sweeping like a metronome. Those moments aren't frightening in the traditional sense. They don't haunt my dreams with screams or shadows. They haunt me with precision, with intent. The universe bending, showing me things that shouldn't exist, testing the limits of my senses. And somewhere deep in my chest, a part of me is grateful. Because these experiences, however impossible, reminded me, not all that's unseen is evil. Not all that watches is cruel. Sometimes, it's checking in, watching, waiting, performing its story, and letting you witness it. I never chase ghosts anymore, but I never forget them either. Every strange sound in a quiet house, every brush against your arm when no one is there, every shadow that moves too deliberately, those are the moments that keep me alive to the invisible world. Because I've learned that some things, no matter how impossible, are real. And some performances are meant just for you. Story 4. After everything back home blew up, I needed to disappear for a while. My cousin Jace had an old hunting cabin tucked deep in Marlow Ridge. That's where I went. Quiet, isolated, snow all around, perfect to think, or avoid thinking. Jace had already left for a job in Haleytown and left the key under a flat stone step like he always did. The cabin wasn't much. One room, a tiny stove squished into a corner, a pantry with cans of stew and instant coffee. But it was dry, warm, and it didn't ask anything of me. That was enough. By the time I got there, early December had already dumped at least 2 feet of snow. The trees were sagging under the weight, and the hill roads behind me were nearly impossible to drive. I spent the first few days slipping into a routine. Split firewood in the morning, boil snow for water, read old paperbacks I found under the cot. I felt almost human again, tired in the right way, like my brain had been unplugged. Then came the 4th night. Dark fell fast in the ridge. One minute the snow glowed orange in sunset, the next it was blue-gray and suffocatingly quiet. I grabbed my coat and flashlight, heading to the woodpile for the last armload of firewood. Everything had been stacked neatly under the old lean-to Jace had built, but one of the smaller piles was scattered, like something had kicked through it. Deer, I thought. Sometimes they sniff around looking for scraps. But the prints in the snow didn't make sense. I crouched down. The snow was soft enough to hold detail. And what I saw wasn't hooves. Not boots either. A massive footprint. 5 long, flat toes, wider than mine, perfectly pressed into the snow. Twice the size of a normal human foot. I tried to rationalize it. Bear? Slip? Maybe. But the weight was even. No drag, no slide. Just precise, solid steps. My brain fought to explain it, but that night, every sound outside made me flinch. The fire popped. The cabin groaned. I stared at the ceiling beams, running every possible explanation. Around 2 a.m., it happened. Slow crunching in the snow behind the cabin. Not wind, not branches. Steps. Careful, deliberate steps. Then, nothing. A pause right behind the cot wall. I sat up, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then came 3 knocks on the wall. Low, steady, measured. Not angry, not fast. Like it was testing something. I stayed completely still, tense to the point of pain, ears ringing. After a minute, silence returned. No retreating steps, no scraping of claws, nothing. By gray morning, the stove's warmth had faded, and my fingers were numb. I wrapped my coat tighter and stepped outside, breath biting sharp in the air. I told myself it was nothing. Always nothing, right? Then I saw the prints. Wider apart this time, same strange proportions, They led from the tree line to the base of the cabin, stopped exactly where I heard the knocks, and then just vanished. Snow swallowed them whole. I spent most of that day inside, chopping wood close to the door, sipping coffee that tasted faintly of pine. Every gust against the window made me jump. That night, I didn't even try sleeping. The next evening, I decided to circle the cabin before sunset. Jace had left an old lantern behind. I figured if I could just see the clearing clearly, I could convince myself it was all imagination. Big mistake. Halfway around the cabin, I spotted it on the ridge. At first, I thought it was a charred tree, blackened by lightning. But it moved. Just a shift of balance, subtle. Not a tree. It was upright, watching. I couldn't make out details, just the silhouette. Broad shoulders, thick frame, unnaturally straight posture. I backed slowly toward the cabin, never taking my eyes off it. It didn't move, didn't blink. I slipped inside and locked the door, hoping that meant anything. The next day it disappeared, but the prints returned every morning after. Sometimes looping around the outhouse, sometimes stopping shy of the porch. Always gone by midday, as if it knew when I would look. By the sixth night, I broke my rule. Just a peek, I told myself. I lifted the curtain over the clearing. It was closer. Past the woodpile now, at least 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Broad shoulders, humanoid shape, but stretched and wrong. Arms too long, hanging heavy. Motionless. Its face was in shadow, but the eyes, deep, set back, staring straight at me. Not glowing, not animal, just cold, human-like, impossibly intent. I dropped the curtain, sat on the floor, hands trembling, heart hammering. By morning, the prince had vanished again. That was it. I couldn't stay. I packed what I could carry and left that afternoon. Hiked 6 miles through heavy snow and frozen brush until I reached the ranger road, feeling like the forest itself had exhaled behind me. After leaving the cabin, my mind wouldn't stop replaying what I'd seen. Every crunch of snow beneath my boots felt like it was being mirrored. Every gust of wind, a whisper of those eyes watching me from the ridge. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just barely escaped, and that it hadn't finished with me. I spent the next few days in the nearest town, trying to convince myself it was just stress. Maybe cabin fever, too much isolation, too many ghost stories bouncing around in my head. But every shadow outside the diner window, every dark alley, every distant figure walking along the snowy streets triggered that same gut clench of dread. By the 4th night after leaving Marlow Ridge, I couldn't stay inside any longer. I drove back toward the edge of the forest, hoping to see the cabin from a safe distance. The road was narrow and treacherous, ice-coated and lined with skeletal trees. I parked near the ranger road, just short of where the real tree line began. I walked slowly, flashlight in hand. The snow had been trampled, but not by me. Long, deliberate tracks, wide and spaced inhumanly far apart, led toward the ridge. My stomach churned as I realized the prints didn't fade like they should. They curved, looped, and returned, as if something had been pacing in the snow, waiting for me to come back. I froze. There, halfway up the slope, the figure emerged. At first, I thought it was a shadow of a tree. Then it shifted. A hulking silhouette, shoulder blades broad, arms too long, the kind of build no human could sustain. It didn't move toward me, didn't run or lunge. It just existed, perfectly still, outlined against the snow, perfectly framed by the moonlight peeking through the clouds. Every instinct in my body screamed to turn and run. But I was rooted, unable to look away. Its eyes, deep and sunken, locked onto me. Not glowing, not feral, just watching, measuring, almost like it could see through the snow, through the trees, into my chest. I backed up slowly, each step crunching loudly in the quiet. The figure didn't flinch, didn't blink, just waited. I slipped behind a fallen log, trying to keep my silhouette hidden, but I knew it could see me anyway. Then it moved. Not fast, not hurried, just a slow, deliberate step forward. Each motion made the snow groan beneath its weight. I counted 5 steps and ducked behind a cluster of young pines, trying not to breathe too loudly. The thing didn't pursue me. It didn't chase. It just observed. By sunrise, I was exhausted, trembling from fear and cold. The prints were gone again, like they had been erased by the forest itself. I didn't stick around to see if it would return. I hiked 6 miles back to the ranger road, slipping and sliding, heart pounding, every shadow in the trees a potential predator. Weeks later, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way the figure had moved, the deliberate pacing, the unnatural proportions. It wasn't an animal, not a man. Something else. Something older, patient, watching the boundaries of its territory and mine. I tried to rationalize. Bigfoot? Maybe. Some undiscovered predator? Could be. But nothing in human or animal behavior matched the way it had paced, the precision of the tracks, the exact locations it chose to reveal itself. It felt ritualistic. One night, back in town, I had a dream. I was in the cabin again, snow piling up outside, the stove cold, the wind whispering through cracks. And it was there, just beyond the woodpile, closer than before. 7, 8 feet tall, shoulders unnaturally straight, arms dragging nearly to its knees. Its eyes, those eyes, boring into me, calm, patient, almost compassionate in their stillness. I woke with my heart pounding, hands shaking, sweat freezing on my skin in the cold room. I realized then that I wasn't just terrified of it, I was in awe. The thing had no interest in hurting me. It had boundaries, rules, a rhythm. And somehow, I had been invited to witness. From that point on, I avoided the ridge entirely. I never went near Marlow again. The cabin sat there, under snow and silence, untouched, a quiet monument to something beyond comprehension. But every time I walk past a forested ridge, see shadows that move oddly, hear steps that don't belong, I remember. I remember the prints in the snow, so wide, so deliberate. The knocks on the cabin wall. The towering figure on the ridge, standing perfectly still, watching me without aggression. And I remember the sense of precision, of intent, like it was marking a story for me alone to witness. I learned something important that winter. Some horrors aren't meant to terrify you with violence. Some aren't there to chase or consume. They exist to remind you of your place in the world, to test your awareness, to confront your fear with something vast and incomprehensible. I still think about Marlow Ridge, even years later. The snow, the cabin, the silent watcher. I never go back, never speak about it in detail, but the memory is as vivid as the day I left. Somewhere in those trees, something moves in patterns only it understands. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I can almost hear the soft crunch of its steps, measuring, pacing, waiting. Not for me to escape, but to witness, to see that I'm still alive and aware. I left the forest, the ridge, and the cabin behind me. But the memory never leaves. It's a quiet echo in every shadow, a rhythm in every crunch of snow, a reminder that some things are bigger than us, older than us, and never truly gone. Story 5. I was 19 when I agreed to keep an eye on my cousin Maggie's cabin for the winter break. It's tucked deep in the lower Blue Ridge foothills, far enough out that you could drive past it without realizing it existed. At the time, it seemed perfect. I'd just wrapped up a brutal semester at Pellissippi, tired of the constant noise at home, and honestly, part of me just wanted to disappear for a bit. I packed a duffel with warm clothes, a stack of paperbacks, and enough trail mix to feed a small army. I imagined lazy mornings reading by the fire, afternoons napping, evenings steeped in silence. That first morning, though, my plans hit a weird snag. On the back window, I spotted a hand-shaped smudge. Not a handprint exactly, it had 5 digits, but the fingers were too long, and the palm too wide, like something pressed against the glass with either wet skin or matted fur. I stepped closer, expecting to see tracks in the fresh snow beneath it. Nothing. No trails, no disturbances, just untouched powder. I stood staring, longer than I should have, before shrugging it off and wiping it clean with my sleeve. I didn't tell Maggie. It had to be nothing. Maybe some oversized raccoon or a deer brushing against the cabin. The first few days were quiet. Too quiet, almost. I split firewood, read by the small stove, and kept my hands wrapped around steaming mugs of tea. The cabin had character, the kind that creaks, groans, and surprises you with noises that make your heart jump. But I liked it. For the first time in months, I didn't owe anyone my attention. Then the weirdness started. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke to a heavy shifting sound on the porch. Not footsteps, not like an animal scampering, but the sound of something massive swaying, weight shifting back and forth. I froze on the couch, pulse hammering, just listening. A minute passed, then nothing. Morning came, and I opened the front door. 2 logs from the woodpile were lying across it at an angle, like someone tried to wedge it shut but gave up halfway. I hadn't moved them. They were carefully positioned, damp with frost, like some silent message. I stepped outside, scanning the snow. No tracks, no disturbances, just the 2 logs. The only neighbors nearby were an older couple, Jack and Cora, living a quarter-mile down the slope. I hadn't met them yet. Maggie said they mostly kept to themselves. If it had been them playing a joke, maybe I'd laugh later. But I kept the porch light on that night. The next evening, I went out to grab firewood before dark. The woods felt off. Dead quiet. No wind, no rustling, not a single bird. I realized how much background noise I'd grown used to, how much life I assumed was always there. After I brought a few logs inside, latched the door, I heard it. A soft knock. 2 polite taps on the front glass. I froze. Looked out. Nothing. No tracks. No shape. Seconds later, the same knock came from the kitchen side. I flipped on the porch light, leaned closer, but the snow was unbroken, the woods motionless. I didn't feel outright fear, just a creeping unease, like boundaries were being tested. I moved the kitchen table in front of the door and didn't bother trying to sleep fully. The snowfall worsened, and I stopped leaving the cabin except to get wood. I'd bundle up, rush out, fill the basket, rush back. Even then, I noticed things. Scratches in the snow, jagged, deep, like something dragged rather than walked. At night, I could hear movement on the roof. Slow, deliberate, not squirrels or shifting ice, steps, testing each inch of the cabin's weight. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, settling branches, but it would stop when I listened, as if it knew I was paying attention. 5 days in, I saw it. Brushing my teeth at the small bathroom sink, I glanced out the window behind me. At first, I thought it was a shadow by the shed, Then it moved. A flash of something dark, tall, impossible to be human, solid but not shiny like fur. Half a second, just enough to drop my toothbrush. I didn't leave the bathroom for a long while, sitting stiff on the closed lid, staring at the door. Next morning, muddy handprints were on the side of the shed. Dried, cracked slightly, elongated. I held my forearm next to one, fingers longer than mine, narrow, impossibly stretched. Too big for gloves, too long for any human. That day, the satellite internet went dead. No warning, no fading signal, just gone. My phone barely held a single bar by the stove. I tried messaging Maggie. Nothing sent, nothing delivered. Nightfall brought the worst. Circling steps, heavy, pacing slowly around the cabin. Then 3 sharp knocks on the wall behind the kitchen. Spaced evenly, deliberate. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Only the fire flickered weakly. I stayed up until dawn, body frozen. By the 12th night, I was in the main room near the stove, trying to sleep. Around 2 a.m., the hallway smoke alarm chirped. Slow, weak, dying. I got up, door creaking, cold air cutting me like knives. Every door down the hall was wide open. I knew I'd closed them all. I reached up to pull the battery from the alarm. That's when I caught it in the reflection. A tall figure, standing in the doorway, motionless. I spun. Nothing. Empty hallway. The next morning I packed everything. Didn't look back. Hiked down to Jack and Cora's, borrowed their truck, and left the cabin behind without a word. The drive into town felt unreal. Snow still blanketed everything, muffling the world, making the road feel like a tunnel through a frozen void. Every time I glanced at the rearview mirror, I half expected to see those prints pressed into the snow behind me, following silently. I didn't stop until I reached Jack and Cora's driveway, heart hammering, fingers numb from gripping the wheel. They didn't ask many questions, just handed me a spare blanket, told me to warm up. I didn't explain, couldn't, words wouldn't fit. That day I spent hiding in their kitchen, sipping coffee, watching the gray sky, trying to convince myself I was done with whatever that cabin held. But night came faster than I expected. By the time the streetlights flickered on, I could feel it. The quiet wasn't normal anymore. Something had shifted in me, eyes constantly scanning the tree line, ears straining for a single wrong sound. The wind through the bare branches sounded heavier, almost deliberate. 3 nights later, I returned to the cabin. I needed to gather the rest of my stuff. I told myself I'd only be outside long enough to grab my duffel, and then I was done. But the second I stepped off the main trail, the snow betrayed me. Huge prints, deeper than any boot, jagged like someone, or something, dragged a clawed hand along the surface. They weren't leaving the cabin this time. They were waiting. I froze. My breath puffed in clouds, each one trembling as I realized how fast I could run. Or not. My gut screamed to turn back, but the duffel was under the porch. Slowly, silently, I moved toward the cabin, flashlight barely piercing the darkness. The closer I got, the more oppressive the air became. Shadows seemed heavier, almost pressing against my chest. I reached the porch and paused. There it was. Standing just beyond the woodpile, impossibly tall, shoulders too broad for a man, arms unnaturally long. Its eyes glinted dark, set deep, staring straight through me. I froze, heart slamming. It didn't move, didn't breathe audibly, but I felt it. Felt the weight of it, the way silence itself warped around the figure. I forced myself to move, grabbed my duffel, swung it over my shoulder. Every step toward the door felt like walking through water. The figure didn't chase, didn't even flinch. It just watched, waiting. Inside, I slammed the door, locked it, and stacked everything I could against it. Chairs, boxes, the small kitchen table. It wouldn't stop it, but it gave me a sense of control. I stayed huddled in a corner, heart racing, waiting for the inevitable. Hours passed. The night stretched. No sounds of footsteps, no knocks, no scratching. Just the wind whispering through the eaves. My body refused to relax. Sleep was impossible. I sat there until the gray fingers of morning light seeped under the windows, illuminating the cabin's small, crooked interior. By noon, I had made a decision. I couldn't stay another night. That cabin was alive in ways I wasn't equipped to handle. I bundled everything I could carry and started the trek down the ridge. The snow was heavy, the brush sharp and frozen. Every step felt like wading through cement. Every snap of a branch sounded like a warning. Halfway down, I stopped to catch my breath. And there they were again. Prints, giant, malformed, pressed deep into the snow. Unlike before, these weren't just outside the cabin. They trailed down the path I was on, crisscrossing like someone was guiding me, taunting me. I didn't linger. I bolted, sliding down slopes, using trees to steady myself, lungs burning. Hours later, I reached the ranger road. No prints, no sign. Just the silence, broken only by the scrape of my boots against ice. I didn't look back. I didn't slow until the town lights twinkled in the distance. That night, in a motel, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Hot shower, warm bed, nothing watching from the shadows. But sleep was uneasy. I dreamed of that figure, towering, motionless, its eyes deep pits of darkness. Even awake, the image lingered, clawing at the edges of my mind. Weeks passed. I tried to return to normal life, classes, work, friends. But I noticed things differently now. Shadows clinging a little too long. Sounds from the attic when no one was home. A faint smell of pine smoke even in the city. I stopped talking about it. People would think I'd lost it. But I knew. I had seen it. Felt it. Years later, I visited the ridge again. During the day, fully in sunlight. The cabin was gone, reclaimed by the forest, roof caved in, snow and moss swallowing the walls. No prints, no marks. But when I stood there, on the ridge, I swore I felt the weight of those eyes behind me. Waiting. Always watching. That experience changed me. I stopped wandering alone in deep woods. I stopped laughing at ghost stories or Bigfoot tales. Some things aren't myths. Some things wait. And if you're alone in the forest, listening to silence stretch like a living thing, sometimes it's already too late. Even now, years later, I'll hear a creak in the floor or a soft tap at the window. My mind races, muscles tense. My heart remembers. The ridge taught me that the world is bigger than our understanding, that some creatures walk in the spaces between sight and shadow. And sometimes, if you linger too long, they notice you. I never went back, and I never planned to. Story 6. My buddy Ethan had just crawled out of a nasty divorce, and I was drained from months of nonstop grind at work. We decided to escape into the backcountry somewhere in Monongah National Forest, close to Larchwood Ridge, west of this tiny speck of a town called Hartwell. We parked on a scraggly old service road, barely a clearing in the trees, with a faded wooden trail marker nailed to a pine that looked like no one had touched it in decades. The air hit like a cold snap, dry and brittle, seeping into your chest, but it was oddly refreshing. After everything going on in our lives, the silence felt good, almost comforting. Finding the trail took a bit of guesswork. The markers were faint, worn down, and we had to backtrack a couple of times. Didn't matter, though. We weren't in a hurry. The deeper we went, the heavier the calm settled in around us. That first afternoon was perfect in its emptiness. The snow lay undisturbed along the creek, thick and frozen. We set up our tents close together and managed a fire that cracked and spit sparks. Ethan pulled a half-empty bottle of bourbon from his pack, grinning like he'd been saving it for exactly this moment. We passed it back and forth, feeling the warmth crawl into our bones, chasing the chill out. Around midnight, there was a crunch behind us. Just one heavy step in the snow. My first thought was deer, maybe something nosing around the creek. Ethan squinted into the darkness and muttered something about bears. Either way, we didn't chase it. The fire was good, the cold sharp but bearable, and we were too tired to play forest detectives. Animals tend to steer clear of flames anyway. The next day we pushed further up the ridge. A few miles in, we found a wide, shallow valley, completely untouched. No animal tracks, no old game paths, just smooth snow and scattered half-buried logs and dry brush sticking out. The quiet was uncanny, the kind that made your ears ring with the absence of sound. We camped on a flat patch between two massive hemlocks. I got the fire going early. The temperature had already dropped below 20 degrees. Everything felt eerily still, almost wrong. Neither of us said it, but we both knew it. Just after sunset, branches snapped in the valley below. Not quick, sharp cracks, slow, heavy, deliberate. A few steps, silence, then another. Closer this time. I grabbed my radio and whispered, "You hear that?" Ethan didn't answer, just clicked the radio once. We stood frozen, scanning the shadows. Then it stopped. About an hour later, Ethan slid into my tent without a word. He looked pale, shaken, but not terrified. "I saw it," he said finally. "Not an animal, not human either." He described something impossibly tall, moving silently through the trees, stepping only on snow and not making a sound except for the crunch beneath its feet. It didn't sneak. It moved like it owned the forest. I tried to chalk it up to nerves, a trick of the light, a shadow playing tricks. He didn't argue, didn't laugh. He hadn't been drinking. We sat by the fire after that, neither speaking much. Every snap made us jump. Every gust of wind had us scanning the tree line. Then, just past midnight, it screamed. Not like a deer or a wolf, something else entirely. Low and guttural, dragging along the ground, then stretching upward into a high, twisted wail that felt physically wrong in your chest. We froze. Footsteps followed, heavy, deliberate. Each one hit the snow with a wet, muffled thud, sinking slightly into the crust. Not running, not stumbling, just steady, confident, like it knew exactly where it was going. We killed the fire and scrambled into Ethan's tent, barely fitting. We didn't speak. We didn't move. Just lay there, backs pressed together, holding our breath every time something crunched outside. It circled once, maybe twice, then nothing. We stayed that way until the first gray light of morning. Outside, the snow had been disturbed. Tracks, huge, over a foot long, 5 toes, wide arches, no claws, perfectly pressed into the snow, ran straight past our tents. No deviation, no hesitation. Not around us, just straight by. We packed silently, skipped breakfast, shoved everything into our packs, and pushed onward. We thought we could reach the service road by nightfall if we kept our heads down. Then the snow started falling again. Fine, dry flakes like tiny needles on our faces. An hour in, the trail vanished. Our own footprints were already fading behind us. Trees all looked the same. We kept moving downhill, hoping for the road. That's when Ethan's radio crackled. Not a voice, not words, just low, rhythmic breathing, steady through the static, close. Not human. Nothing either of us had ever heard. We froze. Then the scream came again. Closer, terrifyingly near. We bolted, blindly through the gray blur of snow and trees. Eventually, we stumbled into a hollow and saw an old lean-to, half buried, rotting, probably built decades ago. We crawled in, shoveled snow into the opening. Walls, broken beams, a partial roof. Barely shelter, but it felt like the only safe place left. We pressed our backs to the wall and waited. The footsteps circled once, slow, methodical, then faded. We didn't sleep. We barely moved. The cold became background noise. Our hands stayed clenched around the radios, though we never turned them back on. When sunlight broke the horizon, we followed the creek north, 5 miles later hitting the road. A plow truck came up from Hartwell. The driver barely looked at us, let us hop in without question. Weeks later, Ethan moved to Florida. He never talks about that trip. I don't think either of us ever will. A few months after that trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us. I kept catching myself scanning the shadows around my apartment, half expecting a hulking shape to emerge from the corner. The memory of those massive footprints, the twisted scream, the way it moved, like it belonged to the forest, not to any creature we'd ever known, stuck in my mind like ice in my veins. Work was miserable, the days blurred together, but every night I dreamt of snow, deep forests, and that hollow. The lean-to that had felt like refuge in the chaos of the night haunted me. I could feel the weight of those eyes, not glowing, just recessed, endless and still, always observing. I started taking long walks in the local woods, trying to rationalize what we'd seen. Maybe it was a bear, a giant elk, something disoriented, but nothing fit. No animal leaves footprints like that. No animal screams like that. One Saturday, curiosity and fear got the better of me. I drove back to the edge of Monongah National Forest, the road crunching beneath my tires. I parked near the same old service trail, now almost hidden under early spring snowmelt. Everything looked familiar, yet wrong. The trees were thinner, the snow gone in patches, but the silence was identical. My stomach twisted. I couldn't tell if I wanted to see it again or to be sure it was gone forever. I followed the trail carefully, listening to every whisper of wind through the branches. The deeper I went, the heavier the forest felt, like it was pressing in around me. Around the halfway point, I saw the footprints again. Fresh, crisp in the mud, impossibly wide, with long, distorted toes. They led deeper into the trees, disappearing into shadows too thick to see through. My pulse shot up. The rational part of my brain screamed to turn back. The irrational, morbid part wanted to follow. Hours passed. The forest darkened. Even in the fading light, I could feel it watching, the way it had back then. Every branch snap, every rustle of leaves sounded deliberate, timed. Then I heard it, that low, guttural sound rising into that same high, warped scream. It wasn't close, but it was around me, circling. I froze. My hands clenched my backpack straps so tight my knuckles whitened. Suddenly, the footprints were all around me. Not leading somewhere, just appearing in the mud, as if the thing had walked in a circle and vanished. I couldn't see it, but I could feel the weight, the presence pressing down. The air grew sharp and cold, unnatural, even though the sun was just setting. My breaths came in tight, shallow bursts. My mind screamed to move, to run, but my legs barely obeyed. Then it appeared, just for a fraction of a second, stepping from the shadows of two massive pines. Towering, shoulders broad and rigid, arms too long for any human frame. Its head tilted slightly, almost curious. Its skin, or fur, or something else, was dark, clinging to its frame, textured like wet moss. The eyes caught the last bit of light, deep pits set back in the skull. No glow, no animal ferocity, just presence. It didn't move toward me, didn't attack. It just watched, and that was worse. I turned and ran. Branches whipped against my face, snow and mud sprayed my shoes. The forest blurred into a chaotic smear of shadows and white. My heart hammered against my ribs as if trying to escape on its own. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel it pacing just behind, stepping quietly in the mud, following my rhythm. The scream cut through the silence again, this time close, urgent, warped, like it was frustrated I'd escaped sight. I stumbled into the hollow, the lean-to from before, half buried in debris and fallen branches. The structure hadn't changed much. Broken beams, sagging roof, walls that could barely keep out the cold. But it felt like safety. I shoved snow and mud into the gaps, barricaded myself inside with my pack. The footsteps circled once, twice, then stopped. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat against the wall, shaking, listening to every tiny movement outside. The cold wasn't biting anymore. It was a constant, underlying hum, like the forest itself was breathing with the creature. By dawn, the forest was quiet again. Too quiet. I crawled out and followed the creek north, leaving the hollow behind. Half a mile down, I stumbled onto the old service road. A truck rolled past from Hartwell, and the driver glanced at me, not questioning, not judging. I climbed in without speaking. The town felt unreal, like stepping out of a nightmare. Weeks later, I tried to tell friends. They laughed at the tracks, the screams, the creature's presence. Said I was imagining things. Maybe I was, I told myself. But every night, the shadows outside my window twisted in ways I'd never seen. Every rustle in the alley behind my apartment made my heart skip. Ethan moved to Florida soon after. I asked him if he ever thought about it. He wouldn't answer. I understood. Some things stay buried in the forest, and some things follow you home. I never went back, never chased shadows again. But sometimes, when the wind whistles just right through the trees outside the city, I swear I hear the same slow, deliberate crunching of those massive feet just outside, waiting. Story 7. I was 36 when I agreed to run my cousin Garrett's trap line for a few days. His little girl had to go to the hospital down in Brenwick, a couple counties south, and his wife had thrown her back out. So they were stuck. Garrett and I go way back. He covered for me during the worst stretch of my divorce. His cabin wasn't one of those rustic getaway spots. It was a plain, square shack with a small lean-to tucked off the side, 6 miles up a ridge outside Elbridge. I drove as far as I could on the snow-packed road, then hiked the rest, lugging my pack, a couple thermoses, and Garrett's old bolt-action rifle. He warned me about bobcats, said it might be smart to have the rifle just in case. I set out early the next morning. The traps ran in a loop, the North Ridge first, a side trail, and finally a long bend behind the cabin. That way, even if things went south, I'd end up near shelter. By mid-morning, I'd checked the north line. Caught a few squirrels and a decent red fox. I didn't skin them out yet, just bagged them, marked the traps for later. I figured I'd return the next day to reset everything once the weather calmed. When I reached the loop behind the cabin, the clouds had sunk low, dragging across the treetops like thick gray curtains. A strange silence had settled in. That kind of heavy, waiting silence you only get in the winter woods. My boots were soaked, gloves freezing, and I realized I should have layered better. That's when the line started messing with me. The fourth trap wasn't just sprung, it was destroyed. The cable had been snapped, twisted until the strands tore apart, like someone had grabbed both ends and wrung it violently. I crouched to examine it. Claw marks, maybe? Deep, deliberate gouges carved into the tree at shoulder height. 4 or 5 inches long, wet bark underneath, fresh. I ran my gloved fingers over them. My first thought, maybe a bear stirred too early, angry, hungry, confused. But it was January, no den nearby, no food. I marked it down in my mind. Move the line lower in spring. Then I got to the 5th trap. Nothing. The flagging tape fluttered on the sapling, but the cable, stake, and notch I'd cut into the trunk were gone. I circled the area, thinking maybe a critter had dragged it off. But the ground was pristine. No fur, no blood, no drag marks. What I did find was a trail leading toward the overgrown logging road. Prints. I can't describe them exactly. They weren't human or animal. Long, wide depressions, oval-shaped, spaced far apart. 3 or 4 feet between each. Too far for walking, too regular to be stumbling. They ran in 2 neat parallel lines, like someone in massive snowshoes. Smooth, heavy impressions with no tread, no heel, no toe. I followed the prints about 50 yards. They curved behind a ridge and then disappeared. No fading, no doubling back. Just vanished, as if lifted straight from the earth. My stomach dropped, not just from the cold. I stood frozen, trying to rationalize. Snowdrift? Strange melt pattern? My hands trembled, that tight ache crawling up my spine. I turned and headed back for the cabin. The trail was slick and narrow. One hand on the rifle, the other free in case I needed balance. Halfway down, a smell hit me. Sharp, rotten, fermented. Part wet dog, part rotting fruit. Gagging into my scarf, I thought maybe a raccoon had found the fox. But the odor was wrong. Too fresh. Too targeted. Then I saw the trees. One had a vertical strip of bark cleanly peeled away, razor straight. The next made my knees weaken. A handprint pressed into snow-crusted bark. Open palm, 5 fingers. Bare, no fur, no glove. The edges of the snow melted slightly, warm from contact. I didn't go further up the ridge. I cut down the slope toward the creek bed, half sliding as I went. Nearly twisted my ankle, didn't care. I just needed the cabin in sight. Finally, I saw the roofline. I sprinted the last 50 feet, slammed the door shut, and latched it. Old brass latch, barely secure. I dragged the kitchen table against the frame. Gloves soaked, hands useless. I struck a match with my teeth and lit the stove. Sat on the rug, rifle across my knees, waiting. For nearly an hour, nothing. No wind, no birds. Just the soft drip of melting ice from the gutters. Then, a heavy step on the porch. Not a knock, not someone stumbling, just enough to make the old boards groan loud through the wall. Then silence. I stayed frozen, barely blinking, every so often hearing a shuffle or scrape, but nothing repeated, just enough to make my skin crawl. Past midnight, I must have dozed. When I woke, the light through the door cracks wasn't sunlight. It was pale, blue, cold, like a dying headlamp in fog. I crawled to the window, peeking from behind the curtain. Prints surrounded the cabin. Same shape, oversized ovals, circling, pacing. Some overlapped, some paused, then stepped aside. Not one set. At least 3 distinct trails, some deeper than others, like they'd taken turns keeping watch. Then the woodpile moved, stacked into an open pyramid, 3 feet tall, almost like a shelter or frame. On top, my bagged fox carcass, untouched, frozen. Dead center, like an offering. I backed away, closed the shutters, didn't look out again. Sat with rifle wedged between mattress and stove, waiting. The rest of the night passed in silence. When daylight came, snow fell again, and I didn't move. 2 days later, no one came back. I told Garrett the hospital visit ran long. Couldn't finish the line. Left it at that. I left the same afternoon, paid a local guy $50 to haul my gear the next week. I haven't been back to those woods since. I thought leaving the cabin would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few weeks later, I couldn't resist checking in on Garrett's line from town, just to make sure nothing was off. The woods were quieter than usual. Too quiet. The locals warned me about strange things around the ridge during winter, but I shrugged it off. I'd been through enough. Nothing in town could prepare me for what I'd already seen. It started small. A rustling in the trees behind my apartment one night. Not a typical branch snap, not squirrels or cats. Something heavier, deliberate. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was nothing, that it was just the wind, but my gut knew better. I kept thinking about those prints, the fox, the hand in the snow. Every detail replayed in my mind. I couldn't shake the memory of the smell, fermented, rotting, wrong. I dreamed about it too. Dreams that weren't dreams. Figures crouched in the dark, massive, moving with unnatural grace, circling, watching. I'd wake up covered in sweat, heart hammering, hands still shaking. A week later, Garrett called. He asked about the traps. I lied, told him the snowstorm trapped me, couldn't finish checking the line. He sounded frustrated, but accepted it. I didn't tell him about the prints or the fox. I didn't want him heading back up there. Some things you just can't warn someone about. Words can't carry that kind of terror. Then the messages started. Odd texts on my phone. Simple, one-word lines. Here. Look. Stop. No number, no trace. Just that. I ignored them. My mind wanted explanations. Glitch, wrong number, prank. But deep down, I knew. It was connected. Somehow, whatever had stalked the ridge had followed me, or at least found a way to reach me. A night came when I couldn't sleep. I walked to the window, drew the curtain aside, and froze. Snow had started falling again, dusting the streets, covering everything in pale white. And there, etched into the fresh layer on my balcony railing, large oval prints, 5-fingered, no glove, no fur. Circling the edge like it had been pacing. My breath hitched. The same prints, the same unnatural spacing. I didn't call the police. They'd think I was insane. I didn't go outside. I didn't even move from the corner of the living room. I sat with a baseball bat, my flashlight, and every sense screaming. Every time the wind shifted, I felt eyes on me, like the forest had followed me in spirit, or something worse. Days passed. I went out only to get groceries. Every tree along the street, every alleyway, I scanned for movement. Shadows seemed too long, too deliberate. I started hearing it at night. slow, methodical steps outside. Not just footsteps, thuds, like it weighed more than any human could. Sometimes it paused. Sometimes it circled. No braking, no running, just pacing. One night, the radio on my shelf sputtered to life. Static, nothing coherent at first. Then a low, guttural breathing, steady, slow, deep, too deep for any human chest. I grabbed the bat, tried to swing at the signal, but it stopped. Silence. Too quiet. Then the scratching started. Faint at first, behind the walls, maybe under the floor. Scratches, not uniform, long and deliberate, like claws testing each board. I packed a bag. Decided I'd leave for the mountains, maybe stay in a motel until Garrett returned. I had my rifle, warm clothes, thermoses, anything to put distance between me and whatever had been watching. I drove for hours, thinking I was safe, thinking I'd shaken it off. Then the sky darkened unnaturally, fog rolling in like it had weight. The world outside the windshield went gray, muffled, and the radio crackled again. Breathing. Low, wet. Close. I nearly swerved off the road. Heart hammering, palms slick on the wheel. The road curved sharply, snow starting to pile in drifts, visibility dropping to zero. And then, in the faint gray haze, I saw them. 3 dark shapes, massive, upright, limbs too long, moving slowly across the ridge. No fear in their motion, just watching. They stopped, aligned, and stared. I couldn't see faces, just deep shadows beneath the caps of their heads. But I felt their gaze, piercing, deliberate. I slammed on the gas, tires spinning in snow, engine screaming. They didn't chase, didn't move closer, didn't retreat. Just lingered, observing. I prayed they didn't move faster than I could run. I didn't dare look back. By the time I reached the motel, sun was just rising. I didn't unpack, didn't shower. Just huddled in the corner of the room, watching the fog through the window, rifle in hand. The walls felt thin, like the creatures could press through if they wanted. I didn't sleep. I didn't breathe more than necessary. I waited until morning, then checked the news, the local traffic cameras, anything to see if they'd followed. Nothing. I never went back to Garrett's traps. He asked, I lied, told him the snowstorm and ice made the lines impossible. I didn't want to talk about the prints, the fox, the shapes on the ridge. Some things don't make sense. Some things don't need to. Jonah, Garrett, me, we all have our brush with the unknown. Some people shrug it off. Some never speak of it. I haven't returned to the ridge. I don't hike alone anymore. And when I'm alone at night, I check every shadow, every sound, every odd reflection in glass, wondering if the ridge sent something with me, watching, waiting, patient. Some nights, I still hear the steps, slow, deliberate, circling outside my door, pacing the perimeter. And I know, if I ever look too closely, I'll see it, just like I did in the snow, in the trees, on the cabin porch. Always watching, always patient. Story 8. I was 17 when my cousin Maddie and I spent winter break at our grandfather's place. He never called it a cabin. He always called it the lodge. It was buried deep in Darrow County hills, miles past the last gas station with real pavement, down a gravel road that seemed to disappear in the trees. The place had electricity, a wood stove, a propane heater for backup, and running water, but no internet, which meant no distractions. Maddie and I had been coming up here for years, usually during deer season or early summer. We knew every creaky chair, every step that would wake Grandpa if we sneaked in late, and exactly how he liked his kindling split. That winter hit early. By the time we arrived on Thursday, snow was nearly waist-deep in spots. Grandpa had shoveled a narrow path from the truck to the front porch, but beyond that, everything was untouched. Thick white silence pressed in from every side. If you've ever been in the woods after fresh snowfall, you know what I mean. The quiet isn't just the lack of sound, it's like the air itself is holding its breath. We settled in fast. Grandpa made stew that night, the kind that smelled like it had been simmering all day. He was up at dawn the next day, chopping wood and checking traps, while Maddie and I stayed under the blankets. By Saturday, Grandpa announced he had to drive into town for more kerosene. He left around noon, promising to return before dark. We stayed back, mostly because the half-plowed road made us nervous, and honestly, it was nice to have the place to ourselves. We played cards and tossed logs on the fire to keep the cabin warm. The propane heater clicked faintly every few minutes, the sound echoing through the room like a tiny coin tapping on a table. Around 4 p.m., I noticed the smoke outside was behaving weird. Normally, it drifted straight up or wavered with the wind, but now it seemed to press flat along the roof, sliding sideways like fog spilling off a cliff. The wind had been dead calm all afternoon. I stepped outside, thinking maybe the flue was clogged. That's when I saw the tracks. They started maybe 15 feet from the back of the cabin, near the first line of trees. Massive prints, longer than my arm, wider than my boot, pressed deep into the snow. Whoever or whatever made them was heavy. They weren't animal tracks. No pads, no claws, no deer hooves. Just long, deep impressions spaced far apart, almost too far for walking, but somehow upright, bipedal. Wrong. I didn't call Maddie. I just stood frozen, staring. She came out behind me, zipped up her coat, and followed my pointing finger. Together, we traced the trail around the side of the cabin. It curved along the wall, hugged the back, and then vanished at the tree line. No return path. Nothing looping back. Just a clean trail leading in and stopping. Maddie tried to brush it off, joking maybe Grandpa was pulling a prank. I could tell she didn't really believe it either. No other tracks, no signs of anyone tromping through knee-deep snow, nothing. Grandpa couldn't have done it. He'd collapse after 20 feet with that cane. We went back inside and bolted every window, even the small pantry one we usually ignored. The front door was already locked, but we secured it again just in case. By dark, the fire was the only source of warm light. Shadows danced across the walls, twitching with every flicker. We weren't scared exactly, not yet, but something felt off, heavy, pressing in. Then the smell came. At first, I blamed the heater, but it was wrong. Musky, sour, wet fur mixed with the metallic tang of raw meat. Clung to your throat, sticky and unnatural. Maddie suggested maybe an animal had died in the chimney and went to check. I stayed by the back window. That's when I saw it, or didn't see it. Moonlight glinted on the snow, casting faint silver shadows. Then one of them disappeared, a vertical black void between two trees, unnaturally tall, perfectly still. I whispered Maddie's name. She came to the window silently. It didn't move, tilt, or sway. Just a dark monolith blotting out the snow. We backed away into the kitchen, keeping eyes locked. I grabbed Grandpa's hunting rifle over the stove. Only 2 shells, but better than nothing. Maddie picked up the fire poker like a spear. We waited. Didn't talk. Didn't breathe too loud. Then came the knock. 3 slow, heavy thuds. Not on the door, on the cabin's side wall. Right outside. Then steps. Slow, deliberate crunching in the snow, circling toward the front, pausing every few seconds, then another step. Not in a hurry, aware we were listening. When it stepped on the porch, a long groan echoed under the boards. Once. Then silence. No retreating footsteps. The smell lingered, soaking into the walls. We didn't sleep. Sat upright in the kitchen like frightened kids, weapons in hand, waiting for it to leave. The propane lantern flickered out, and we didn't bother relighting. Just sat in the faint orange glow of the fire coals until dawn. Daylight finally came, and we cautiously opened the door. I raised the rifle. The porch was empty. No marks, no disturbance. But when we circled to the back, the tracks remained, unchanged. Not softened, melted, or moved. Exactly where they'd been. Grandpa returned later that afternoon. We told him everything. He didn't flinch, just nodded quietly and sank into the chair by the fire. "I told you, don't wander near the woods at night," he said. We stayed one more night. Sleep was impossible. Every crack of the wood stove, every whisper of wind outside made our hearts pound. We didn't talk. We didn't move. Just listened. Shadows on the walls stretched, twisted, and leapt with every flicker of the coals. The air smelled sour and musty, faintly of damp earth and decay. The next morning, Maddie and I packed quickly. We told Grandpa we'd leave a day early. The snowstorm was our excuse, though he never pressed. We hiked through the drifts, stiff and frozen, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Nothing followed. The cabin receded behind us, silent, still, oblivious, or waiting. It's been 15 years. I haven't been back. Maddie hasn't either. Sometimes, when it snows heavily, I imagine those tracks appearing outside my window, bipedal and wrong, pacing in the white quiet like they did that night. Shadows that don't bend to light, steps that don't fade, smells that cling to your throat. I don't think I'll ever forget the silence of that winter in the hills. The memory is like frost under your skin, cold, tight, and impossible to shake. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear it again. 3 slow knocks, crunching snow, heavy, deliberate steps. Watching, waiting. Always patient. Always there. Even now, when I hear a branch snap outside, I can't help but glance at the woods, half expecting a column of darkness to stand between the trees, impossibly tall, perfectly still. Some things stay with you. Some things don't need names. And some things I hope I never see again. Story 9. My cousin Jace had this ancient trapline winding deep in the pines north of a place nobody even notices on the map, called Hollow Creek. That winter, Jace screwed his back falling through a rotten barn floor while trying to salvage lumber. Naturally, my mom volunteered me. Didn't ask, didn't negotiate, just said I was heading out there for the rest of the season. I think she mostly wanted me gone from the house. School was all remote that year, and I'd been bouncing off the walls from being cooped up. She told me something like, "Time you start pulling your weight." Translation, go do some damn hard work for someone else and zip it about complaining. Jace didn't argue. He rolled up the next morning with a spare pair of boots and a thermos of black coffee I wasn't allowed to touch. I spent the next 3 weeks following him through knee-deep snow, lugging a frozen bait bucket and trying not to die of exhaustion. He carried this old Winchester rifle, worn and heavy, and eventually let me shoulder it when his back flared up. Way too heavy for me, but I pretended it was fine. Shooting was out of the question. I think he just liked the idea of someone trudging behind him looking armed. Most mornings were quiet and bone-chilling. We'd head out at first light, run a few miles of line, check traps, drag back whatever had been caught, and get home before darkness swallowed the woods. The forest wasn't creepy, not yet. It just felt endless, like you could scream your name and hear nothing but the echo of snow crunching underfoot. Then came the day we split the line. We were standing at a fork, and Jace pointed toward the northern loop. "You take this one. I'll circle back south. Meet me at the truck," he said. No room for debate. He handed me the rifle, nodded, and added, "Don't lollygag, and don't talk to anything that talks back." I laughed. He didn't. The northern loop had 11 traps, spaced across maybe 3 miles of trail. I'd helped check them before, but never alone. I figured I'd just keep my head down, move fast, and not screw anything up. About halfway through, I saw something in the snow. Tracks. Not anything Jace had ever pointed out. Strange tracks. Big. Stomach-tightening big. Longer than my boot by at least half, and spaced way too far apart for normal walking. No heel marks, no tread, just 5 thick, round toes and a wide, flat pad. They weren't crossing the trail. They were following it. I froze. Told myself maybe it was a bear, standing upright for a moment, sniffing the air. But the stride was all wrong. Too long, too human, and heavier. The prints punched clean through the crusty snow, even in spots where Jace and I barely left marks the day before. I pressed forward cautiously, moving quiet, not even sure why I felt like I had to. When I got to trap 8, I knew this wasn't an animal. A birch tree loomed next to the trap, maybe 20 feet tall. The bark had been peeled away in long spirals, curling like someone had grabbed it and twisted it off. Not claw marks, no scratches. Smooth, bare wood stripped high overhead, almost surgical. I radioed Jace. Static. Tried again. Still nothing. Raised it higher, spun around, climbed a ridge for better reception. Third try, nothing but static. That's when the feeling hit me. Exposed. Not a squirrel all morning, no birds singing, no wind. Just the eerie creak of old trees and the sound of my boots crunching frozen snow. One trap had a squirrel frozen solid, but no blood. The snare wire? Gone, clean, like someone unwound it with fingers. Ground was untouched except for those same enormous tracks, circling the tree like something had been watching. I stood there a long minute, gripping the rifle like it could do anything. Gloves damp from sweat, despite the cold biting through. Every nerve on edge, hair standing under layers of clothes. Trap 11 didn't even get checked. I spun and started back toward the truck. I knew Jace would call me soft, or lazy, or both. Didn't care. Every step felt like something was sliding silently behind me, just out of sight. Then I heard it. A click. Soft, sharp, tongue-on-teeth kind of click. I froze, turned toward the ridge. Nothing. Click again, closer. Not an animal, not any natural sound. Deliberate, mimicking. I dropped behind a fallen log, heart hammering. My breath hung in pale clouds too long in the frigid air. Sun low, temperature plunging. Legs quivering, not fear at first, just stiff from standing too long. And then I saw it. Movement through the trees, 30 yards downhill. Flicker at first, then more. Big, looming, weaving between trunks. Not fast, not noisy, just fluid, controlled. I couldn't see a face, just a tall, wide shape swaying side to side unnaturally. Its back blended gray and brown, perfect camouflage. Shoulders rolled smoothly as it moved. Didn't walk like anything I'd ever known. I didn't move until I couldn't see it anymore. Made it back to the truck without glancing once. Locked the doors, sat with the rifle across my lap, staring at the tree line like it owed me an explanation. Jace rolled up 20 minutes later. Didn't speak at first, just looked at me, then at the gun. "You saw it," he said. "Not a question." I nodded. Engine started. He added quietly, "Next time, don't follow its tracks. Some things aren't meant to be found." Silence the whole ride home. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even the snow seemed heavier somehow, like it was pressing down on me with intent. I tried to tell myself it was nerves, the cold, cabin fever, whatever. But every time I stepped outside to check a trap, my gut twisted. That northern loop felt alive, like the forest itself was breathing, waiting. I went back the way I had come, trying to keep my boots quiet. But every snap of ice underfoot sounded like a gunshot in the stillness. The tracks were still there, or new ones. I couldn't tell. They crisscrossed my path, some overlapping the last, some veering off into the denser pines, never fading, never returning. It was impossible. Whoever or whatever made them had the strength to crush through snow without leaving a mess, and the intelligence to disappear without a trace. At Trap 9, I froze again. Something had moved the bait bucket. Not just nudged it, it had been lifted, set down, carefully righted, like it had been studied. No marks around it. No prints that I could trace. I knelt in the snow, running my gloved fingers over the frozen metal. A thin scratch, barely noticeable, curved across the rim. Not human, not animal. Something else. My chest tightened. The forest felt darker now, even in midday. Shadows pooled in hollows that hadn't been there before. Trees that had looked normal yesterday seemed twisted, reaching like crooked fingers. The silence was deafening. Then the smell hit me. A sharp, sour stink, like decayed meat mixed with wet wool. I gagged into my scarf, spinning slowly, trying to find the source. Nothing. Just trees and snow. I pressed on toward Trap 10, moving faster than I should have. The rifle felt heavier in my hands now, but I held it steady, eyes darting between trunks. Every step I felt it, the faint pressure of awareness. Something was following, pacing just beyond my vision. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My mind kept picturing it swaying between the trees, towering and silent, watching. Trap 10 was untouched. Nothing in it. But the ground was different, grooved, pressed down in strange oval shapes, just like the day before, circling the base of a spruce. I crouched low, examining them. Each step sunk deep into the snow, perfectly formed, evenly spaced. Too large for any human, too precise for any beast. Something was here, studying me, learning me. My fingers trembled around the rifle. I decided to skip Trap 11. My legs were jelly, my back screaming, my head spinning. I didn't care anymore about the work. All I wanted was the truck, warmth, and a wall between me and whatever lurked in those woods. I moved faster now, boots slipping on icy patches, heart hammering. Then I heard it again. Click. Soft. Sharp. The same sound from yesterday, only closer. Tongue against teeth. Deliberate. Mocking. I dove behind a fallen log, pressing my face into the snow, trying to make my breathing silent. My ears strained. The sun was bleeding out behind the ridge, shadows stretched long, shadows that felt alive. And then I saw it. A flicker. Movement. 30 yards downhill. Wide, hulking, swaying side to side like a pendulum. Its back a sickly blend of gray and brown, blending perfectly with the trees. Shoulders rolling, limbs controlled. Not walking. Gliding. I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart was hammering so loud I thought it might give me away. It watched. I could feel it, not through sight, but through the air itself. Heavy, malignant, waiting. And then, nothing. It vanished. No noise, no trace, just gone. I scrambled the last 100 feet to the truck, dove inside and slammed the doors, locked them. Sat there shaking, rifle across my lap, eyes locked on the tree line like it might appear again. Jace arrived 20 minutes later, same silence. He looked at me, eyes steady, then at the rifle. "Saw it, huh?" he said quietly. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. He started the engine. "Some things out here," he said, voice low, "aren't meant to be found. Don't follow the prints next time." That night, the woods crept into my dreams. Shadows stretched into my room. Tall, faceless shapes swayed outside my window. I woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding, rifle across my chest. I swore I heard clicks, footsteps, soft breaths in the dark. Every time I closed my eyes, the forest followed me. The next day we packed up early. I refused to check the southern line alone. My hands still shook from yesterday. Even daylight couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching, pacing, waiting. The forest was silent, almost politely, like it knew I had noticed it and now it was humoring me. We drove home without a word. The roads were still slick, the truck groaning under the weight of snow. Jace didn't glance back, didn't mention it, just kept driving, the engine hum low and steady. I clutched the rifle, glancing at the tree line every time we passed a shadow, every hollow that might hide those swaying, watching figures. Weeks later, I returned to the cabin to get my own gear. The snow had melted in patches, but the memories hadn't. I didn't set foot near the northern line, didn't even look at it on the map. I left it alone. Some things don't want to be disturbed. Some things are patient, silent hunters that wait in shadows long after the last human has fled. I haven't been back to Hollow Creek since. I don't check traps anymore, and I've stopped asking about the northern line. Jace still goes, keeps his distance from those tracks. But I know it's there. Always waiting, watching, patient.